Minneapolis, Minnesota, October 27. KarlAnthony TownsThere. There are 9 NBA games on Monday, a full schedule for the start of a week. The action starts at 7:30 p.m. ET with 3 games: the Timberwolves at the Heat, the Nuggets at the Knicks, and the Spurs at the Celtics. 3 more games tip 30 minutes later, with the 76ers at the Rockets, the Magic at the Pelicans, and the Hornets and the Grizzlies. The Mavericks are at the Jazz at 9:00 p.m. ET, followed an hour later by the Raptors at the Trailblazers. The final game of the night is a rivalry game, with the Warriors at the Clippers. My favorite plays of the day can be found on the following slides in Fansided's Fanduel Daily Picks. Each day, in order to offer a variety of price points at each position, you can find 2 slides for each position, one for high salary options and one for high value options. Each pick is ranked on a scale of 15 stars to indicate the confidence in the pick. The final slide of this post has more detail on what each level means, but in short, more stars means more confidence in the selection on a points per dollar basis. Important note: every day the goal of this post is not to give you a copy and paste lineup. Instead, each selection is given while highlighting the factors you need to consider when building a customized lineup for yourself. If you want to see an example lineup, you can find it on the final slide of the post, but I suggest you adjust your lineup to fit your personal taste. Get draft help, Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard, and Fantasy Football Tools to keep up with all of Fansided's DFS NBA coverage. Head over to the Fantasy Basketball Hub, where each day you can find a post like this tailored for Fanduel, as well as one specifically designed for usage on DraftKings. In this post, all salary and fantasy points references are to Fanduel's scoring system and salaries. If you have any additional questions or thoughts, or are looking for updates as we approach tip-off, follow at Fansided Fantasy on Twitter, or you can follow my account at Professorge. Let's take a look at your best options for both studs and value players at each position. Page 2. New Orleans, LA, October 28. JRUE Holiday. Stephen Curry, GS at LAC $9,400. Curry has been on fire since a cold first game or two, averaging 28.6 points with 6.4 assists, 4.6 rebounds and 2.0 steals in his last 5 games. This is a rivalry game, which could motivate Curry, but he also has to deal with the defense of Patrick Beverley, which could be a challenge. Kyle Lowry, tour at poor $7,500. Lowry started off the season slowly, much as he did last season, but has shown signs of life in his last couple of outings. In his last game he turned in an 11.12 assist, 10 rebound triple-double, which generated the type of fantasy point output that Lowry was known for last season, when his price tag was routinely a couple $1,000s higher. JRUE Holiday, No vs ORL $7,500. Holiday has been playing very well over the last week, averaging 19.3 points, 6.8 assists, 4.5 rebounds and 2.0 combined block steals in his last 4 games. He is coming off his best game of the season, a 46.3 fantasy point effort against the Cavaliers, and has positive momentum going into Monday. Kemba Walker $8,100. Playing great but tough matchup. Kyrie Irving $8,200. Back-to-back very solid outings. Page 3. PHILADEL PHIA, PA, October 25. TJ McConnell, J. Augustine, ORL at No $5,800. Augustine is coming off an awful 7.5 fantasy point performance against the Hornets, but in the 3 games before that he was averaging 12.7 points, 7.3 assists, 2.7 rebounds and 2.0 steals in the previous 3 games that he started in place of Elfrid Payton. Payton is still out on Monday, so Augustine has the chance to bounce back against the Pelicans. TJ McConnell, $4,900. McConnell has taken on a larger role for the 76ers with Markelle Fultz out, and in his last 2 games has averaged 10.5 points, 8.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds and 3.5 steals, which has translated to more than 36 fantasy points per game. Jamal Murray, Den at NY $4,700. Murray is up and down, but has played well in 2 of his last 3 games. He had an 8.6 fantasy point clunker against the Hawks, but produced 29.1 fantasy points in the game before and is coming off 39.7 fantasy points in his last outing. Nice reward for the price, but with a decent level of risk on Monday night. Page 4. MEMPHISTN, October 28. James Harden, How vs Phi $11,000. Harden faced the same 76ers squad 5 days ago, and turned in 27 points with 13 assists, 3 rebounds and 4 combined block steals. Chris Paul is expected to remain out, so Harden should have a similar level of responsibility on Monday. DeMar DeRozan, tour at pour $8,300. DeRozan has found his scoring stroke with a solid all-around game of late, with averages of 26.5 points, 4.5 assists, 3.3 rebounds and 3.0 steals in his last 4 games. He could easily find himself in a backcourt shootout on Monday, with the Trailblazers and Raptors both sporting Jeremy Lamb. At $6,500. Lamb has been quietly productive all season, and has stepped that up in recent games to the tune of 18.7 points, 5.0 assists and 3.7 rebounds with 2.0 combined block steals in his last 3 games. He has a tough matchup against the Grizzlies, but he also has a good price which could make it worth the risk. Page 5 KarlAnthony TownsThere, October 27. Danny Green. Andrew Wiggins, MINNEAPOLIS $6,200. Wiggins has produced between 25 and 32.5 fantasy points in 4 of his 6 games thus far, and in the other 2 he had a floor of 16.8 and a max of 46.4 fantasy points. He thus has a reasonable expected value, but with big upside if he gets hot. Danny Green, saw at Boss $5,100. Green has produced between 28 and 41 fantasy points in 4 of his 6 games thus far, and 3 of his last 4. He had a 5.2 fantasy point clunker against the Magic in a blowout, but bounced back in his next game and thus has his usual expected value, around 30 fantasy points on Monday against the Celtics. Terrence Ross, ORL at no $3,800. Ross started the season with 2 games averaging around 30 fantasy points, then turned in 3 straight awful games before bouncing back with 29 points in 33 minutes in his last outing. His price has been strongly influenced by his 3 bad games, so if you believe his actual level is closer to 30 fantasy points, he could be great value on Monday. He's a high-risk, solid upside, low-priced option. Page 6. Use your arrows to browse Minneapolis, MN, October 27. Jimmy Butler. Kevin Durant, GS at lack $10,300. Durant is a metronome. He has produced between 44 and 59 fantasy points in each of his lot 5 games, and has a similar expected value on Monday in a rivalry game against the Clippers. Jimmy Butler, MINNEAPOLIS $8,000. Butler got off to a slow start in Minnesota, but he returned after an illness absence to produce 40.5 fantasy points in his last outing. His price necessitates production of that level, but it is still a risk as to whether he will remain there, or slide back into the low mid-30s of fantasy points that he had been before the illness. Evan Fournier, ORL at no $7,400. Fournier has been consistently solid all season, and has stepped up over the last several games with Elfrid Payton out. He has a floor performance of 30.6 fantasy points this season, but also has a 44.3 and a 49.2 fantasy point effort to show his upside around his 37.3 fantasy point average. Use your arrows to browse.